Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Owoh's Corner, my own little corner of art. And we're back hosting another live stream. I'm going to be doing some more research for my final project, for my capstone project. Our cartoons are made for kids, and tracking sort of where that originated from and how that mentality came to be. So last we left off, I had figured out that usually it's around people who are 40, who are between their 40s and 60s. And those are the late boomers and Gen X. They were part of the civil rights and the hippie movements, which was counterculture. And it also had things like recreational drug use, rejected the mainstream. It was against Jim Crow. That then later became the yuppie movement, which is when counterculture became culture. It was a paradox that led to the end of the hippie movement and gave birth to the yuppie movement, which was which was young professionals. Young professionalism then led to an increase in wages. So that's your around $40,000 yearly yearly income. Uh, the stereotypical American family, people still using recreational drug use. Yet at the same time, tax cuts, tax cuts as well as wealth was not distributed evenly, which led to the gang culture, which is survival of the fittest. People join gangs for a sense of belonging as well as safety, inner city poverty, different things like that. And then that led to a perceived moral decline from religious groups, which then became the moral majority, and they fought against things like gay rights, abortion, recreational sex. The moral majority was founded by Jerry Falwell, who was a Baptist minister, and he really gave birth and gave rise to the whole televangelists and ministers and priests um, online. I mean, no, not online, but he gave birth to televangelists, which is priests and ministers streaming their sermons and services, as well as being political figures and writing books and selling books about their beliefs and their mentalities, as well as God. So we have this moral decline in the moral majority, and so now we just need to track how all of this tracks back to animation. So I'm reading this article right here about the Satanic Panic. I'm not sure if I can show the entire thing because I don't know if I might get copyright struck or anything. But essentially, just, sit with me and I'm going to read through this article real quick. I found it last stream, and so now I'm going to reread it and read over it again. Collective fears that consume the U.S. in the 90s. Perfume, teenagers, and deviant music immediately consumed his entire led to a number of hip hop cases that were heavily influenced by Owoh. Okay. And then we have the West Memphis Three. West Memphis 3, Satanic Ritual Abuse, claims relied on overzealous law enforcement and substantial children. Some of the and their case stands as one of the worst examples of what happened. But even if the police investigated that, your call influence many members of the public had no such plans. Was the subsequent outrage from those figures. Failure to read art metaphorically. But as well, that this precise reading this history offers another possible explanation. Satanic pain never proved it's alive in the day and it's like super extra. A number of factors contributed to the increase in Christian and free education. The same year, organized Santa Claus. So perhaps, wait, that's in that 1960 to 70 time frame. So the multiplying can also be. Now let's look at the moral decline. Now in this article, it's talking about a string of summer murders that happened in 1969 that shocked the nation. They're also talking about the Satanic Bible from Anton LaVey, or Levy, perhaps, as well as other philosophies and self-actualization theories from writers like H.L. McKinnon, Ayn Rand, and which pretty much became sort of like the modern framework for Satanism. And that's in that moral decline era. Allow me to read a little bit more. And I just want to let you guys know that for the most part, I'm I'm kind of neutral. Well, how do I put this? I am in favor of expression as well as I'm in favor of expression as well as storytelling. So when it comes to these topics like religion or what is the right or wrong thing, I'm a fairly neutral person. I don't really care either way. I believe that people should have the freedom of expression, but that freedom of expression should also not also can't be the freedom from consequence. With its claims being based on a true story of the impact of America's collective the existence of the rise of the world of disease. I've seen Christian language. Teens are accounts of a childhood and young adulthood. jump over it, pretty fun getting it. Then came Satan Solar. Can't establish. Got another pattern. Okay. So the moral majority and the satanic panic, from what I'm getting and from my research, those are the biggest proponents. However, while it's while it's religious based, it still doesn't make sense how, even though it's religious based and even though the bulk of practice religion in America is Christian, is some form of Christianity, like Catholicism or Protestant, it still doesn't make sense how those who are not Christians or those who are practicing atheists, they still believe that cartoons are for kids. Now, from what I've just read and from what I've researched, it's that animation has been seen as something from Satan because Christianity, it is a failure. The whole satanic panic thing came out of Christians and other religious groups being unable to view art as metaphorical. They see art as something literal. So things like expressionism, like symbolism, things like that, they're taking it for what it is at face value. So my next research topic, and this will be sort of like a side topic, is explaining art and metaphor, which will help me go over not why not why the moral majority and the satanic panic was wrong, but rather to further educate those who still view art as something which is negative. So I've gotten why a bulk of Americans believe cartoons are for kids, mostly because they can't take art as a metaphor, and also because they have this history and they already have this background of viewing things as the devil or viewing things as satanic ritual abuse. But that still doesn't explain other groups, because if everyone believed that animation was ritual Satan abuse, then they wouldn't allow their children to watch it regardless. That's really not how sort of it works mentally. So I have to look at not why people are allowed to watch cartoons, but I need to go back to my theme of cartoons are made for kids. So what happened in cartoons that made them be viewed as for kids? So first, allow me to make a list. Now, why are cartoons made? And this is just from my experience. Now, me personally, I believe that animation is used as a medium for storytelling, but that's just me, and I can't go off of my own beliefs. We need to think more practically. So we have things like My Little Pony, Thundercats, He-Man and She-Ra, different things like that. So, why are cartoons made? I'll use a smaller sticky note for this. And keep in mind, I should add an addendum or at least a little side note that this isn't really for feature films. Well, feature films can be a factor, but for the most part, it is for serialized cartoons. So let's see. There's the first point, and I just have to type this to get it off my chest. So the first point is storytelling. What else? Commonly, films and serialized cartoons are made to sell merchandise. I believe there was a group. Um, there was a group of people. I think they were the Latchkey Kids, or at the very least, So the Latchkey Kids was Generation X. But Generation X was born in the mid 60s. No, that's right, the mid 60s to 80s, and the first serialized animation came out in the 1960s. So that does line up, but at the same time, that was also the yuppie movement. Because the hippies waned in the 1980s, and that was when the baby boomers and some of the younger Gen X became the yuppies. And yeah, animations for kids. So, for starters, now wait a second. If Okay, so we know that the latchkey generation is also Generation X, and they were born between the time frame of the 60s and 80s. So that means that the hippie movement was going on between the 60s and 70s. So Gen X are going to be around that teenager, um, they're around that teenager, young adult time frame between the 60s and 80s, which is also in the late boomers. They're in their 50s, and that's the 1950s and 60s. They were also active in the hippie movement as well. The hippie movement then became the yuppie movement, and the yuppie movement was in the 70s to 80s time frame, which was also like right around that 70s to 80s time frame was also gang culture. Now, what we have to know is that the latchkey kids, Gen X, they were home alone. They had little to no adult supervision. So that's also how or why the latchkey kids also became affiliated with gang culture. Little adults, super. So then, if you're having little supervision, I guess this is where psychology comes in. So, allow me to research the psychology of not having a parent in the home. do their homework, their great self-work. More than clear children are 8 or younger. I would think these movies would have gone out with some of them. Some studies show the number of latchkey kids doing poorly in school is as high as the homeowners are engaged in activities. This is a good search. So the latchkey generation, they are independent, and because of their freedom, they spend a lot of time in front of the TV. And actually, yes, that does add up with my findings because because of the civil rights movement and the hippie movement, and because they were home alone, they had to take care of themselves. They had to look out for themselves. And they also had to watch, well, they didn't have to watch a lot of TV, but usually when you don't have that parental figure, you have more freedom to do what you want to do, which led to them, which is what really led them to this, to have this sort of lax mindset of things, and to let them have that sort of freedom of thought and freedom of expression. So then, so yes, that does make sense. A lot of time from the TV. Um, I'll then have to look at millennials too, because if the trend has persisted, then that could be another factor of okay. Now it is time to look at millennials. Okay. Millennials were born between 1981 and 1996. And currently they're between the ages of 26 and 41. Okay. So right now that I've gathered some more information, I do need to look at the millennials now because the millennials are a factor in this because they are actually the generation that grew up and were born in that they were the generation that lived in the 90s, and the 90s was a really sort of it was a big push. The 90s was a big push for animation because that was when classics like He-Man, Thundercats, other properties like that sort of hit the mainstream, and that was also when animation became sort of imported. That was when we have classics like um, Akira, My Friendly Neighborhood Totoro, um, and other projects like that. Apologies, I can't really think of them all off the top of my head. But yes, the 90s was when a lot of anime was imported. So we have things like Sailor Moon and other projects like that. That was also the rise of geek culture and punk culture, as well as shops like Spencer's and, well, no, not Spencer's, but sort of those, those I'm I'm failing to find the word for it, but just those goth and punk show and punk stores which had memorabilia and merchandise from classic TV. I'm just taking a bit of a mind break. I've done a lot of research and I've also done a lot of piecing together. So I guess this will be the segment where I give my sort of personal thoughts and personal feelings on this project. Um, this project has actually been really fun for me to work on. It's certainly taken a lot from me and out of me, but at the same time, I'm learning so much about the history of America, as well as my history as an artist and as an animator. I'm seeing how people have viewed expression and metaphor. I'm seeing how people have gone to great lengths to fight for themselves, fight for their rights, fight for their freedom of expression. I'm seeing a lot of just a lot of history of this nation. And it has been a lot. It has taken a lot for me to piece together. But this has been a very fun and very insightful project. And I certainly believe that I am a better artist, a better animator because of it, because I am informed, and because I have learned so much. So, for right now, I am in my second week of research, and on Friday, I'm going to have a conference with my supervisor, with my art supervisor, and we're going to have to go over my notes, what I've learned, different things like that. And I'm actually going to have to likely compile a quick summary of the information that I've learned for her to view because I can't just take a picture of my board and present it to her. This is a this is running research, meaning that I am piecing together information and I'm beginning working on my thesis on my final theory while also researching. Now this is week 2. So week 2 is a continue of week 1. Week 1 was my starting research and now I'm doing more intermediate research. Next week is going to be my official week of theory crafting, processing information, different things like that. And then after week 3, week 4 is going to be me researching again or getting some final notes while also script writing. Then after that, my week 6 recording recording and script writing as well as getting B-roll footage together. Then I'm going to want to edit everything together. I'm going to want to make a rough draft, a starting draft, so to speak. And then after I submit that for review and peer review, then I'm going to have to go back, make any edits or any fixes that need to be made, and then I'll submit my final product, my final project. And then I will be done with University 4990, and then I will have officially graduated. This project has certainly taken me a lot of time. A lot of time, a lot of effort, and I'm actually still very excited to work on this project. Because my end goal for this project is to educate people. I want to educate not just my fellow artists, but other people, other people in general, and not just Americans. I feel as though everyone can learn from this. I feel as though everyone can has the right to trace back the everyone has the right to trace back behavior and figure out why things are the way they are. Because a lot of people, they record history, but not many people really think, how does our history lead to present day? And so from what I've learned is that I didn't have a chance to write it down, but essentially um, the millennials, they were brought up and they were raised to be career focused and have that sort of career mindset. They were focused to put they were not focused. They were educated to put education first, but they are still sort of reeling from that civil rights era and from that yuppie movement which brought in a lot of commerce, a lot of money, as well as a push for more rights. So, from the outside looking in, to me at least, it looks as though America has that sort of shift where we're conservative for one generation, then we're more liberal for the next. Then it's conservative, liberal, conservative. And so that means that people are trying to sustain their values, but that sustaining of values gets so tight and it holds on to people so tightly that the next generation, the next era, they want to sort of break out from that hard control and carve out more exception, more self governance, more expression and things like that. But then as those people get later in their life, or as those people start raising their own children to be self sufficient, they see that there still needs to be some more control there. So that's really how that cycle is forming. Um, so yeah, this has just been a very eye-opening research, and this is all stemming from cartoons are made for kids and sort of how that came to be, which is kind of funny. Because now, what we're seeing now is we're seeing a lot of more serious and complex storylines. I mean, look at Netflix. Netflix has a bunch of animated properties and a bunch of different shows under their belt. We also have shows like Avatar and Code Lyoko, which were in the early 2000s, which was around, I want to say, 2006 to 2010. And those really tested the waters for how serious animation can be. And now in present day, we have Dota 2 Dragon's Blood, we have Arcane League of Legends, we have more properties. Just a few years ago, look at Hell of a Boss and look at Hell of a Boss and Has Been Hotel, which were made by VipsyPop. And those have cult followings, and they're by no means made for children. So let's get that out of the way first. We have Long Gone Gulch, Murder Drones. Those are some more pilots that came out. And I think, I'm actually not sure if Murder Drones or Long Gone Gulch have been picked up yet, but I know for certain that Has Been Hotel has been picked up for a series. Pork Chop and Flat Screen, that's sort of an animated web series that's been coming out since I think 2014, maybe even before that, because I remember watching Pork Chop and Flat Screen when I was in middle school. We have Red versus Blue, we have Ruby, we have different properties like that. So that has been a real shift in animation in the West now being seen and viewed as a medium. And there's even an uptick and an upsurge of manga and comics being seen more seriously too, and having more serious, long-reaching storylines and plot points. My Hero Academia, that has a cult-like fandom following here in the West. People love My Hero Academia, and a lot of black people actually love Naruto too. Naruto came before Naruto came before My Hero Academia, and that has a major following as well. Even to this day, people still love and talk about Naruto. People love Dragon Ball Z. People love Sailor Moon. People love Madoka Magica. So obviously and quite clearly there is a love, at least in recent history, for animation as a engine for serious and complex storytelling. It's only really recently that actual American companies and actual American properties, and sadly, those companies and those properties, they're more so independent. And what I mean by that is, give me 1 second. And what I mean by that is, it is not the 50 to 60-year-old producers and men who are pushing for animation as serious story mediums. Those are independent people. Those are the millennials and the Gen Z who are making their own animated shows, their own animated stories and products. That's not the 60, 70-year-old producers who are in charge of stories. If you look at Disney, Disney is still afraid to show blood. I think the last Disney property I saw that showed blood was Encanto, and that came out earlier this year. And I think the most recent show, I mean not show, the most recent Disney film to show death was Raya and the Last Dragon, and that came out I think in 2021 or 2022. I mean, no, not 2022. It came out in 2020 or 2021. I'm not really sure about that, but that has been the most recent. That has been the most recent Disney film since The Lion King, I believe, that showed a somewhat graphic or somewhat overt character death. Since then, death has mostly been referenced or sort of alluded to but not overtly shown, and that's because, again, this mindset and this mentality that, oh, cartoons are made for kids, kids wouldn't understand. We have to make sure everything is, PG Keen and nice for the kids. And I'm just here to research and I'm just here to try and educate people and sort of teach people. I've been live for about an hour now. I think I'm going to try and go for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. I'll try for 2 hours. I do have other stuff to do, but likely I'll host another stream tomorrow. And so, like I said, right now I'm on this page right here on Satori.com. And I'm looking at the different phenomenon that happened between the 1980s and 1990s, that sort of era where millennials were coming up. And essentially, this is not going to be, how do I put this? I'm not just going to be using this website. However, what I am going to be doing is I'm going to be using this website as certain plot points and certain, not plot points, but certain notable dates and notable movements and events that I should research more critically when I have time. This is just to get me started. Oh yeah, this is my school water bottle. The I think the day before my graduation day, I had went to my student store to buy some merchandise before I graduated and left. because more likely than not, I'm not coming back. I got some workout clothes. I got this water bottle. Uh, I got like a hoodie, like maybe the week before, because I needed to pick up my tickets for my family. What else did I get? Uh, I got some other stuff too. I got a keychain for my dad, a license plate for my mom, and just some other stuff because this was a big achievement for me. And, this did take me 4 years to complete. And I'm not gonna lie, I did have my ups and downs. I did have to take a few summer courses to ensure that I graduated within 4 years. Because I told myself, I said, hey, I'm getting out of here in 4 years. I know some people they have to go 5 years, but me, I'm getting out in four. And I did it. And yeah, all I really have is these three summer courses, and then I'm done. And then I'll be out in the real world and looking for a job. I'm still working on my teaser trailer, and my teaser trailer is coming along. Now, I have to tell you guys, I am no perfect animator, and because I'm doing things on my own, I kind of have to redo stuff or take my time with certain things, which isn't a bad thing. When you're in art, you always have to take your time, and your projects, they are going to be a while. Even in digital painting or cel shading, those things take time as well. So just try to pace yourself and just try to set benchmarks for yourself. A lot of the issues that we animators face is that we want to add more, or we're perfectionists and we're trying to make sure that our each frame looks perfect. Now, yes, you have to make sure that you sustain quality, but I'm talking about my animations. I should be working on my research right now. I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, I'm just so excited, and I love animation in general. This has been a fun project, a fun just thing to work on. And I'm kind of tired. I feel kind of drained, but I'm doing it for you guys. I'm doing it so people can learn and people can be educated about this stuff. Like, honestly, the hard part is the research. The hard part for me is the research. After this, all I have to do is just get B-roll footage. Maybe some of my maybe some of my old speed paints of me animating I can add to, or like some B-roll footage of like marches, or like kids holding big boom boxes, or like different things like that. I don't know. I don't know what I'll do. I don't know what I'll find. So let's go to the top of this page and let's look. So, for starters, this is known as the technological revolution. And the first personal computer came out in 81. One of the hand terror attacks, wars, assaults, and okay. So yeah, another factor in millennials and another factor with millennials is this is really a continuation of really sort of like I wouldn't say it's the resurgence of the hippie movement, but more so like the hippie movement is continuing on during this time period and people are still fighting for gay rights and abortion. And we also have to remember with the moral majority and their view of the moral decline, they're having that pushback with the millennials now and the time period in which the millennials are being born and raised. Uh, let's see. Now, where's that tape? I am currently looking for tape on my. Oh, it's right there. I think I just found a missing link, or at least a connection. So that is the economic recession. Information. Welcome to the before with 80s and 90s, clips such as the beats. Art as protest. Artists protest, Beatles and Elvis. Disbelief of freedom of speech. Think this is Actually, I think I'll use blue for this. I think I found at least the beginnings of. I think I found something. I think I'm on to a discovery. Okay, the Wild Decade was a decade of time in the 90s where art was seen as protest. We have these figures like the Beatles, Elvis, freedom of speech, and with the advances in the technological revolution, that was when we had a bunch of ease of communication, not just in our own country, but with other countries and other places around the world as well. So then, if art is seen as protest, and if art is seen as, and if there's a now emphasis on expression and other beliefs like that, then wouldn't that mean that the cartoons that we've been watching and enjoying as kids, they themselves could have had their own sort of objective and own view? Like think of the subtext, think of the cartoons where they have those messages of the day of like be kind to your brothers and sisters and don't smoke and different things like that. It's also coming on the nights. So let's see. 90s cartoons. Messages. I do want to increase my screen. I want to like block this stuff in case something pops up that may get this live stream flagged. We have hidden messages in cartoons. Let's see. Dang. What am I looking for? Oh yeah, PSAs. That's the proper term for it. Now, the issue I have, well, the issue I'm trying to figure out is were PSAs were PSAs mandated or did they do them of their own volition? That is the question that needs to be asked. Now let's see. Ooh, it is 1 hour and 40 minutes. Okay. So allow me to shrink in this. This is actually really. I still want to look into gang culture, and I remember watching a video on YouTube, which was a really nice research video on black people and their connection to anime. It talked about subjects like being the underdog, as well as gang culture, and then it also talked about Gen X, as well as um, what was it called, mass incarceration, and essentially growing up by yourself. So like turning to TV and stuff like that. So likely later today, I will try to find that video again, and I'll take notes on it to add to my board or to add to my personal notes as well. But I think actually, I think I've made quite a few good discoveries. Yeah, I've made quite a few good discoveries today, and I've also learned a lot more. A lot of things now are sticking into place and sticking together. I'll likely have a another live stream either tomorrow or Friday, and next week is going to be me compiling my thesis and tying everything together. I'm going to be script writing. I'm going to be making a sort of final theory on why this mentality came to be. But for what I've learned and for what I've researched and figured out a lot. This has been a really fun project to work on. It's been really nice, and it's really eye opening. But anyway, I think that's it for this live stream. It's been fun. It's been nice. Thank you for sitting with me while I look at websites and look at different information and things like that. So to sum up what I've learned today is pretty much what's been going on during the millennial generation and sort of how they've developed is a technological advancement as well as a great recession, which likely impacted their mentalities not only on work but education as well. It seems that the millennial generation, it is equal parts yuppie movement and hippie movement as well as civil rights, because there's still that pushback from the moral majority of, because the moral majority is so anti-abortion, anti-gay rights, they're trying to bring back morality, so to speak. The millennial generation and pretty much the wild decade in general, they have a sort of pushback against the moral majority who was kinda in power during then. So you have the goths, you have the geeks, you have the punks who are counterculture still. Then you have the Beatles, you have Kiss, and you have this movement of art as expression and art as a form of protest. And a lot of people, and during that time period, a lot of people saw art protests as these different bands. But what we have to remember is artists and animators, they they are protesters too. And I actually learned this in my art history course, but essentially art was also used as a form of protest and as a form of counterculture as well. And I'll likely try to jot down some of my notes from my art history course as well. But essentially, during this time period, during the 80s and the 90s, that is when we have public service announcements, and that is when we have shows like He Man, She Ra, Hey Arnold, Rocco's Modern Life. They are subtextually they have these storylines that portray very hot topics for their time periods, but then sort of in the middle of shows or at the end of shows like the Magic School Bus, Thundercats had PSAs. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they had PSAs too, where they would try to, teach kids or like give kids sort of like a message of the day. And so, because parents felt so comfortable having their children in front of TV all day, and again, this is a side effect of Gen X, the latchkey generation, of their generation having to be independent and their generation having to pretty much look out for themselves. That sort of carried over to millennials, of millennials being given somewhat free reign and freedoms as well. And because parents didn't really tune in onto what their children were watching, that is how civil rights, gay rights, different things like that came to be and sort of express themselves. And yes, there were still rights and there were still policies on what can and can't be shown, but you still have the subtextual storytelling, and you still have the PSAs at the end of shows that are still educating kids. That is how people have simultaneously thought, oh, cartoons are for kids, but still children are being educated, and children are still being taught kind of what to and what not to do. And again, this still is a very working theory, but as I'm getting closer and closer to present day, I am learning more and I'm figuring out more. So anyway, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Look through this video again. It's been really fun to stream this. This has been quite the experience. I really loved and I really enjoyed working on this project. It's been very fun. It's been very exciting. And I can't wait to compile all of my notes, all the information, and get it back to you guys in one concise video essay. But yeah, this has been Owoh's Corner, my own little corner of art. Like, comment, subscribe, share even, tell your friends, maybe tell your parents even, I don't know. They can learn something from all this. Anyway, I'll see you guys on my next video or my next live stream. Bye.